The sound of laughter echoed through my house, the one my late husband and I built, brick by brick, through sweat, sacrifice, and love. But tonight it didn't sound like home anymore. It sounded like a stranger's place, loud, careless, and filled with voices that didn't belong. From the shadow of the kitchen doorway, I stood still, half hidden by the curtain. The air was thick with the smell of wine, perfume, and betrayal. The living room glowed under colorful lights, music pulsed through the speakers, and people were dancing right on the same floor where my husband and I had once slow danced to old vinyl records. Then, above the music, came Rachel's voice, sharp and ringing like a bell. "Finally, she's gone. We're free now." Laughter erupted. Glasses clinked. Someone cheered. And then my son, my only child, David, raised his drink and shouted, "To new beginnings." The crowd roared in agreement. I felt my knees tremble. My hands gripped the edge of the counter just to stay upright. No one noticed the figure in the shadows. No one looked down the hallway where I stood like a ghost haunting the home that had once been mine. Because in their minds, I was gone. 3 days earlier, we had our final argument. It had started over something small, Rachel complaining about the creaky stairs again. "This house is falling apart," she said, her tone dismissive. "It's time to sell it and move to the city. We can finally have a modern home, David, one that's ours." I tried to stay calm, but every word was a knife. "This isn't just a house," I said softly. "It's where your husband grew up, Rachel, where his father and I," she interrupted, rolling her eyes. Yes, I know, it's sentimental, but we can't live in memories forever." Before I could answer, David stepped in. His voice wasn't angry, not yet, just tired. "Mom, she's right. You've held on to this place for too long. Maybe it's time to let go." "Let go," I repeated, stunned. "This home is all I have left of your father. You can move if you want, but I'm staying here." That's when he said it, the words that shattered something deep inside me. "Maybe it's not your world anymore, Mom." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. I just stared at him, my son, the boy who once clung to my hand when thunderstorms scared him, who built pillow forts in this very living room. I swallowed my pride, blinked back the tears, and quietly left the room. That night I packed a small suitcase, grabbed the old photo album from the shelf, and walked out without saying goodbye. For 3 days, no one called. No one asked where I was, until tonight when I came back to collect a few personal things just after sunset, hoping to slip in unnoticed. But as I opened the front door, I froze. Music thundered through the house. Laughter spilled into the hallway. And there she was, my daughter-in-law, twirling in a glittering red dress, surrounded by people. "Finally, she's gone," she shouted again, raising her glass. "No more guilt trips, no more old memories. This is our house now." The guests cheered. Someone popped open another bottle. David stood beside her, silent but not stopping her either. He forced a small smile, but the guilt in his eyes flickered for just a second. That second was enough to break me. I had never hated anyone before, not truly, but in that moment, something inside me turned cold. I looked around at what used to be my living room. The old family photos had been removed from the walls. The lace curtains I'd sewn years ago were gone. The antique vase, the one my husband gave me on our 10th anniversary, had been shoved aside, replaced with a gaudy modern lamp. Everything I loved had been erased, and the people who should have cared were celebrating my absence. I turned to leave, but then I heard Rachel's voice again, louder now, mocking. "You know what, David? Your mom always made me feel like I wasn't good enough, like I was some intruder in her world. Well, guess what? She's the intruder now." People laughed. My son didn't defend me, he just looked away. That silence, his silence, hurt more than anything she could ever say. I stepped outside quietly, closing the door without a sound. The cold night air hit my face, but I barely felt it. My heart was heavier than my suitcase. As I walked down the empty street, I could still hear the echo of their celebration behind me, the laughter, the music, the cheer. "Finally, she's gone." Yes, I was gone, but not in the way they thought. They believed they had freed themselves from me. What they didn't realize was that they had freed me from the illusion that I still mattered to them. That night, I drove toward the lake to my old friend Margaret's cottage and decided not to return. For the first time in my life, I wasn't a mother holding a family together. I was just a woman, heartbroken, betrayed, and strangely at peace. Because sometimes when people push you out, they forget one thing: you can leave, but you can also choose how you return. And one day I would. For weeks, I stayed at the cottage by the lake, a quiet, weathered place surrounded by whispering pines and still waters that mirrored my heart. I told no one where I was. The only sound came from the old clock ticking above the fireplace, marking each second of my disappearance. Sometimes I'd watch the sunrise stretch over the lake and wonder if they missed me. Then I'd remember Rachel's laughter, her voice echoing in my mind. Finally, she's gone. And the thought would vanish like morning mist. But peace never lasts forever. One morning, I received a call from Mrs. Langley, my old neighbor. "Margaret, dear, is everything all right? I haven't seen you around. And there are strangers walking in and out of your home. Looks like your son's hosting something again." My chest tightened. I thanked her and hung up. Strangers? Again? I had already accepted that Rachel didn't respect the home, but to hear it had become a revolving door for parties, guests, and who knows what else, it stung deeply. That night, I lit the fireplace and stared into the flames. The warmth should have comforted me, but instead, it only reminded me of what I had lost, not the house, but the heart inside it. I decided it was time to return. Not to stay, just to see. The home that wasn't home. It was late evening when I arrived at the edge of the property. I parked the car by the old oak tree and walked the rest of the way, my shoes crunching softly against the gravel. The house stood tall, bathed in yellow light, music pouring from open windows. I could hear Rachel's laughter again, mingling with unfamiliar voices. When I peeked through the side window, I almost didn't recognize the place. The antique cabinet where I kept my husband's medals was gone, replaced by a sleek, modern bar setup. The family photos that once lined the hallway had been replaced with abstract art. Even the curtains, my favorite floral ones, were gone. My heart clenched. It wasn't just redecorated. It was erased. And then I saw something that broke me completely. On the mantel, where my husband's portrait once rested, now sat a silver sign that read, "The Harris residence, new beginnings." That was Rachel's doing. I felt tears prick at my eyes, but I didn't let them fall. Instead, I slipped away from the window and walked around to the back, where the garden used to bloom. But even the roses were gone, dug out, replaced by a patio and a fire pit where Rachel's friends were laughing and roasting marshmallows. I used to sit there every morning, trimming petals, humming softly to myself. My husband had proposed to me in that very garden, and now it was just ashes and laughter. Inside the storm, "Hey, anyone seen my lighter?" a voice called. It was David's. I froze behind the shed. He stepped out with a cigarette in hand, shoulders slumped, eyes tired. He didn't look happy, not like the man who had toasted to freedom. Then Rachel appeared, holding 2 wine glasses. "Come on, babe, don't sulk." "We're having fun." David shook his head. "It doesn't feel right, Ratch. This was Mom's place. It feels like I'm trespassing." Rachel rolled her eyes. "Trespassing? It's our house now, David. You're just feeling guilty. She's gone. She left on her own. We didn't push her." "But we did," he murmured, his voice cracking. She sighed, stepping closer. "Listen to me. That woman controlled your life for too long. You deserve to breathe. We both do." He didn't answer. Just looked down at the lighter in his hand, the one his father had given him. "She kept everything connected to Dad," he whispered. "I feel like I lost both of them." Rachel's smile faded. For the first time, she looked uneasy. "You're overthinking again," she said quickly. "Come inside. People will notice you're gone." They went back in. The door shut. The music rose again. But that one moment told me everything I needed to know. My son wasn't lost. He was confused, manipulated. Rachel might have turned my home into a stage, but the guilt in David's eyes told me there was still a chance, a small ember of the boy I once knew. The hidden recorder that night, as the music grew louder, I quietly slipped into the small shed near the fence, the one David and I used to use for repairs. Inside, dusty boxes and old furniture lay forgotten. But one thing still worked. The power outlet I'd installed years ago. From my bag, I pulled out a small device, a voice recorder. I set it near the window, facing the patio. It wasn't revenge I wanted. It was truth. If Rachel truly felt no remorse, if she was manipulating David, I needed to prove it to him, to myself, and maybe someday to the world. For 2 hours, I recorded everything. Laughter, gossip, drunken remarks, and then the moment that would later change everything. Rachel, her voice loud and slurred, said, "I told you David would never leave if she stayed. I had to push her hard." "And now look at us, we're finally free," someone else asked. "What if she comes back?" Rachel laughed coldly. "Then we'll remind her this house isn't hers anymore. I'll make sure of it." My fingers trembled as I stopped the recording. That was enough. The goodbye that wasn't the next morning, I drove back to the lake and sat on the porch, staring at the calm water. I had the proof now. But strangely, I didn't feel angry anymore, just tired. I realized something profound. I didn't want revenge. I wanted peace. Rachel had taken my home, but she couldn't take my dignity, my memories, or my heart. Those belonged only to me. And David, I still believed he would find his way back. So instead of using the recording publicly, I placed it in an envelope labeled for David. Alongside it, I wrote a short letter. The truth is never far away, my son. Listen carefully, not just to others, but to your own heart. When you're ready, come find me. Then I mailed it. 2 weeks later, the lake was still and silent when a car pulled up the gravel path. I didn't need to look up. I already knew who it was. David stood there, pale, weary, holding the envelope in his hands. His eyes met mine, filled with regret and realization. "Mom," he whispered. "I heard it, everything." Behind him, Rachel's car was gone. I didn't ask questions. I just opened my arms and he stepped into them. The pain didn't vanish. The betrayal didn't disappear. But for the first time in months, I felt something close to forgiveness. Because no matter what happens, a mother's heart always finds her child, even after the darkest silence. The lake shimmered like glass beneath the afternoon sun, the soft ripples reflecting the trembling of my heart. David stood before me, shoulders sunken, eyes hollow, holding the letter and recorder that had exposed everything. He looked older somehow, as though the guilt had aged him. "I didn't know, Mom," he whispered, his voice cracking. "I swear I didn't know she'd go that far." I said nothing at first. Silence was my oldest strength. I'd learned that words often fell short where quiet understanding did more. When I finally spoke, my tone was calm but heavy. "David, you didn't have to know. You only had to listen to your heart, not her voice." He swallowed hard, tears threatening. "I should have stopped her. The things she said, the way she talked about you, and I let her. I thought she just wanted a fresh start." I studied him, the same boy who once ran through these woods, scraped knees and laughter filling the air. The same boy who used to bring me wildflowers from the garden now buried beneath concrete. And yet, for the first time in years, I saw something different in his eyes, not pride, not anger, but remorse. "Where is she?" I finally asked. He sighed. "Gone. She left last night after I confronted her with the recording. Tried to deny it at first. Then she said something like, 'You're nothing without me,' and drove off." I nodded slowly. "Maybe that's for the best." David looked up, desperate. "Mom, I don't deserve forgiveness." I stepped closer, placing my hand on his cheek. "Forgiveness isn't something we earn, son. It's something we give so we can breathe again." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind rustled the trees, carrying the faint scent of pine and rain. The reckoning a week later, David asked to visit the house with me. "I can't live with what we did to it," he said. When we arrived, the sight of it made me catch my breath. The one sprite paint had dulled, the lawn was overgrown, and the energy that had filled it for years had faded. Without laughter, without warmth, a home dies quickly. David stood by the gate, staring at the bare patch where the garden used to bloom. "It doesn't even feel like the same place." "It isn't," I said softly. "You can't rebuild something with the same bricks if the foundation's rotted." He turned to me. "Then maybe we start over." I smiled faintly. "Not with what's gone, David, with what's left." We spent the day cleaning, sweeping dust, taking down the tasteless decorations, and opening the windows to let the air flow freely again. By evening, the house no longer felt angry. It was wounded, yes, but breathing again. In the quiet that followed, David found an old photo of him as a boy, sitting on his father's shoulders, both laughing under that same roof. He stared at it for a long time. "She hated this photo," he said quietly. "Said it made the place feel stuck in the past." I smiled sadly. "That photo was our past, yes, but it was also our joy. Rachel never understood that you can't erase love by painting over it." Rachel's returned just as the sun began to set. A car screeched to a halt at the end of the driveway. The moment I heard the door slam, I knew who it was. Rachel stormed up the path, her eyes blazing. "So this is what you've been doing." "Playing happy family with her again." David stood firm. "This isn't about her, Rachel, it's about what you did." "What I did," she spat, pointing at me. "She manipulated you for years, always guilt-tripping you with that poor widow act, making you feel like you owed her everything." I met her gaze calmly. "I never asked for anything but respect, Rachel, something you could never give." She laughed bitterly. "Respect? You controlled everything, the money, the house, even how David lived." "Gave him freedom." David's voice rose, finally strong. "You didn't give me freedom, you took it from me. You filled my head with resentment until I couldn't even hear my own mother's voice." Rachel's expression faltered, anger fading into something else, disbelief, maybe fear. I spoke softly. "Rachel, this house was never your prison, it was your test, and you failed it." She clenched her fists. "You can't take it away from me, my name S on the paperwork." I stepped closer. "Not anymore." Her eyes widened. "What?" David handed her a copy of the trust papers. "Mom changed everything. The house and land belong to the foundation now, not us, not anyone." Rachel's face went pale. She turned to me, shaking. You planned this." I didn't answer. Sometimes silence is the only truth people can't argue with. Rachel backed away slowly, tears forming, anger collapsing into panic. "You'll regret this," she hissed, and then turned and left, her car's tires kicking up dust until she vanished down the road. A quiet victory after she was gone, David stood by the window for a long time, watching the road where she'd disappeared. He finally said, "You didn't even need to raise your voice." I smiled faintly. Noise fades, silence lingers. That night, we lit a single candle on the kitchen table, not for celebration, but for closure. The house seemed to exhale. Walls no longer tense. "I'll rebuild the garden," David said softly, "just like before." I looked at him, eyes glistening. "No, son, not like before, better." He nodded, and for the first time in months, peace filled the air. Epilogue: the new beginning. Months passed. The house slowly came alive again, not through money or decoration, but through care. The old garden bloomed once more, brighter than ever. David worked the soil every weekend, planting marigolds, lilies, and the roses I used to love. One morning, I stood by the window, watching him kneel in the dirt, sunlight catching the edges of his hair. For the first time in years, he looked like my son again. He looked up and smiled. "They're growing fast," he said. "So are you," I replied. He laughed softly, wiping sweat from his brow. "You're not planning on disappearing again, are you?" I shook my head. "No, I've already gone once, now I'm home." The wind carried the scent of fresh earth and new beginnings. Maybe this was what freedom truly meant, not the absence of someone, but the return of what truly matters. Months passed like quiet ripples on a still lake. The house had regained its soul. Laughter, warmth, and life once again flowed through its walls. The air smelled of garden soil and hope, and even the creaking floors seemed to hum in peace. But peace rarely lasts long when someone like Rachel still walks with unfinished anger. I hadn't seen her since that day she stormed out, but whispers began to reach me, whispers that carried through neighbors, mutual friends, and even from the foundation lawyers. Rachel wasn't done. The return of the snake, it started subtly. Phone calls to the foundation office, accusations that the trust was forged. Letters to community members claiming I'd stolen what was rightfully hers and David's. She even went as far as to visit the town hall, spinning tales of manipulation and emotional abuse, painting herself as a misunderstood daughter-in-law mistreated by a vindictive old woman. The town loved gossip. Her story spread like wildfire. David was furious when he found out. "She's twisting everything, Mom. People actually believe her." I sipped my tea calmly. "Let her talk, David. Truth doesn't panic." He frowned. "But she's ruining your name." I smiled faintly. "A name isn't ruined by lies, only by silence, and mine is far too strong to crumble from noise." Still, deep inside, I knew Rachel wouldn't stop until she destroyed something. I just didn't know what her next move would be. The invitation 2 weeks later, a gold-embossed invitation, arrived in David's mail. Rachel was hosting a charity gala for family restoration. I almost laughed when I read it. The theme: forgiveness, healing, and moving forward. "She's mocking us," David said bitterly. "Or testing us," I replied. "She wants attention, not redemption." He looked at me uncertain. "Should we go?" "Yes," I said after a pause. "We'll go, but we won't speak first." The evening of the gala shimmered with pretense. Chandeliers sparkled, cameras flashed, and the guests wore masks of politeness over faces hungry for drama. Rachel stood at the center, dressed in silver, her hair curled perfectly, her smile flawless, the picture of grace. But beneath that charm, I could see the same sharpness in her eyes. She spotted us the moment we entered. Her smile stiffened but didn't falter. "Margaret, David," she exclaimed, arms open wide as though nothing had happened. "How wonderful to see you both again." David stiffened beside me. "You didn't invite us to see us, Rachel. You invited us to show us something." She tilted her head innocently. "Oh, don't be so defensive. I just wanted to clear the air. After all, we're family." "Were," I corrected quietly. Her eyes flickered, but she recovered quickly. "Fine, were, but people deserve to know the truth, don't they?" Before I could answer, she clapped her hands and called for attention. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to say a few words about second chances." The public confrontation, the room hushed. Rachel stepped onto the small stage, microphone in hand, her smile gleaming. "Life isn't perfect," she began. "Sometimes misunderstandings tear families apart. But I believe in forgiveness, in moving forward." There were approving murmurs from the audience. She continued, voice dripping with charm. "When my dear mother-in-law suddenly left us, I was devastated, but I understand now she needed space. We all make mistakes." A few people glanced at me, their expressions uncertain. David's jaw tightened. Rachel turned toward us dramatically. And that's why tonight I want to publicly forgive her for what she did to us. The crowd gasped softly. I stood slowly, my heart calm but resolute. Forgive me, I said, my voice clear. For what, Rachel? She smiled sweetly. For manipulating David, for turning him against me, for trying to ruin our lives out of jealousy and control. The audience went dead silent. Then, before anyone could speak, David's voice cut through the tension. Enough, Rachel. He stepped forward, his expression steady. You want the truth, fine. He pulled something from his pocket, the same voice recorder I had left for him months ago. Rachel froze. David turned to the audience. You all deserve to hear what kind of person she really is. He pressed play. The recording echoed through the hall, Rachel's unmistakable voice, laughing. I told you David would never leave if she stayed. I had to push her hard, and now look at us, we're finally free. Gasps filled the room. Rachel's smile collapsed into horror. David's voice shook with emotion. That was recorded at our house, right after she drove my mother out. She threw a party celebrating her absence. Rachel's composure shattered. That's not fair, you don't understand, but the room was no longer hers. Whispers turned into murmurs, then outright disgust. Celebrating her leaving? How cruel. What kind of woman says that? Rachel's voice trembled. This is taken out of context. I stepped forward, calm and quiet. No, Rachel, that was the context. She looked at me, a mixture of rage and fear. You set me up. No, I said softly. You set yourself up. All I did was step aside and let your truth speak. The collapse by the time the night ended, Rachel's reputation was in ruins. Sponsors withdrew from her charity, friends distanced themselves, and the whispers of sympathy she had once gathered turned to pity. The next morning, her social media accounts disappeared. The house she rented in town was emptied within days. She left quietly, no parties this time. David didn't celebrate. He just sighed heavily and said, I almost feel sorry for her. I nodded. Almost. Then I looked at him seriously. Don't let this harden you, son, let it teach you. He smiled faintly. It already has. The garden of healing spring returned, and the garden flourished again. Roses bloomed where ashes once lay, lilies swayed gently beside the fence, and the scent of new life filled the air. David placed a small stone near the garden's edge, engraved with words that made my heart swell. For the lessons we learn and the love we don't lose. I touched his shoulder, proud. You've grown into the man your father always hoped you'd be. He smiled softly. Thanks to you. I looked around at the sunlight filtering through the trees, the laughter of neighbors passing by, the hum of life returning. Finally, I whispered to myself, home. Not just a place. A peace earned. A freedom reclaimed. Moral, evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes it smiles, lies, and charms. But truth, even whispered, has the power to silence every falsehood in time. The weeks after the gala were strangely quiet. The tension that had once haunted every corner of my life had faded, replaced by a gentle calm. The sun rose softer, the mornings smelled of wet earth and blooming roses, and laughter had found its way back into the house. David had taken over the foundation's day-to-day work, dedicating his time to helping single mothers rebuild their lives. Watching him pour his energy into kindness made me proud. Maybe, I thought, this entire ordeal had reshaped him into the man his father would have been proud of. But peace, I've learned, has a way of being tested one last time. The unexpected letter one rainy afternoon, a letter arrived. No name on the envelope, just a return address from another town. When I opened it, my heart skipped. It was from Rachel. Her handwriting was shaky, uneven, so unlike the bold, confident script I remembered. Margaret, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want you to know I lost everything. The gala ended my career. My family won't speak to me. The people I thought were friends turned their backs the moment the truth came out. For weeks, I was angry at you. I wanted to blame you for all of it. But I've had time, too much time to think. You were right. I didn't want freedom, I wanted control. I wanted to prove I could replace you in David's life instead of learning to be part of it. I don't know who I am anymore, but I'm trying to find out. Tell David I'm sorry. Rachel, I read the letter twice before placing it on the table. My first instinct was skepticism. Rachel had used words as weapons before. But this time, there was no venom, only exhaustion. David found me sitting quietly with the letter. Who's it from? He asked. I hesitated. Rachel, he tensed. What does she want? I handed him the letter. He read it slowly, his expression softening as he reached the end. Do you believe her? I looked out the window. I believe pain changes people. Whether it makes them better or bitter, that's their choice. The visit a few days later, another letter came, this time not to me but to David. After reading it, he turned to me. She wants to meet, in person. I could see the conflict in his eyes. He didn't want to reopen old wounds, but he also couldn't ignore her plea. Then go, I said. He looked surprised. You think I should? Yes, I replied gently. Closure isn't just about forgiveness, it's about peace, for both of you. The encounter they met at a small cafe 2 towns over neutral ground. I didn't go, but later that evening, David told me everything. When Rachel walked in, she was almost unrecognizable. Gone was the polished, calculating woman from before. She wore no makeup, her hair tied back, and her voice, once sharp as glass, was quiet, measured. I didn't think you'd come, she said softly. I didn't think you'd ask, David replied. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of rain tapping against the window. Finally, Rachel said, I deserved everything that happened. Every whisper, every door closed in my face. I was cruel. I told myself I was protecting you from her control, but the truth is, I was jealous of the love she had for you. I wanted that, David sighed, his voice heavy. You could have had it, Rachel. Mom tried. She welcomed you. You just never saw it. Her eyes filled with tears. I know, and now I can't undo it. He looked at her for a long moment, then said quietly, No, you can't undo it, but you can start over somewhere else. You don't need to erase the past, just learn from it. Rachel nodded, wiping her eyes. I'm trying to. Before leaving, she handed him a small envelope. For your foundation. It's not much, but maybe it'll help someone better than I helped myself. When he told me this later, I saw in his eyes that something in him had healed too. The new garden's spring deepened into summer. The garden outside our house burst into full bloom, colors so vivid they almost seemed to hum with life. David had planted a small section called the Garden of Second Chances. It was dedicated to women who had overcome hardship, and quietly to Rachel. Every rose that bloomed there was a reminder that growth doesn't come from perfection, but from learning to start again. Sometimes, as I watered the plants, I'd think about Rachel's letter. Whether she found peace or not, I hoped she had learned what I finally understood: control is not love, and letting go is not losing. The newspaper article one morning, David came home holding a newspaper. Mom, you should see this. There on the second page was an article. Former socialite turns counselor. Rachel Harris helps women recover from emotional abuse. The photo showed her standing outside a modest community center, smiling faintly, not the confident, camera-ready smile from her past, but something gentler. She's running workshops for women who have been manipulated or mistreated, David said quietly. She's helping people. I stared at the picture for a long time. She finally found a way to rebuild, I murmured. David nodded. Do you want to write to her? I smiled softly. No, some lessons don't need replies. Knowing she learned it, that's enough. The final scene months later, the foundation hosted a small event celebrating 5 years since its founding. Dozens of women, mothers, daughters, widows, survivors gathered in our backyard. Laughter filled the air, the sound of children playing mingling with the gentle hum of life. David stood beside me on the small stage, giving a speech about family, forgiveness, and renewal. His words were honest, full of gratitude. When he finished, he looked at me with tears in his eyes. And to my mother, who taught me that silence can be stronger than anger, and that love doesn't always say yes, but it never walks away. Applause filled the air, but I barely heard it. My heart was full, not of pride, but of peace. Later that night, as the lights dimmed and the guests left, I sat alone on the porch, watching the stars. From the distance, I could almost hear echoes, laughter from the past, the cries, the arguments, the lessons. And somewhere in that symphony of memory, I whispered, Finally, we're all free now. 15 years had passed since that night, the night my world shattered and rebuilt itself piece by piece. The house was quieter now, not because of absence, but because of peace, the kind of silence that feels earned. Outside, the morning light poured through the curtains, warming my wrinkled hands as I held a cup of tea. My reflection in the glass was different, older, yes, but softer too. There was no bitterness left, no tremor in my heart when I remembered what once was. Time had done what no confrontation could. It had softened the edges of pain. The visit that morning, a familiar sound of tires on the gravel, made me look up. A car door closed, and then laughter. I didn't need to guess. Grandma. 2 small figures rushed up the path, Emma and Noah, my grandchildren. Their energy filled the air like sunlight through storm clouds, and behind them was David, holding a bouquet of daisies. Mom, he smiled, we thought we'd surprise you. You always do, I chuckled, opening my arms. Come in, all of you. The children raced to the garden, where the Garden of Second Chances still bloomed every spring. David followed me inside, helping me with the teapot. "You look good," he said. "Still tending to your flowers, huh?" "Of course, they listen better than most people I know," I teased. He laughed, shaking his head. "You haven't changed." "Oh, I have," I said softly. "You just don't see it because you changed too." Rachel's legacy. As we sat down, I noticed a pamphlet sticking out of his jacket pocket. I pointed. "What's that?" He pulled it out. On the cover was a familiar name, Rachel Harris Foundation for Emotional Renewal. I smiled faintly. "She did it, didn't she?" "She did," David nodded. "It's grown. They've helped hundreds of women across the country, therapy, shelter, education. She turned her pain into purpose." For a moment I said nothing. Then quietly, "I'm proud of her." He looked surprised. "You are?" "Of course," I replied. "She fell hard, but she didn't stay down. That takes strength. I don't need her apology anymore, David. I see it in what she's become." He exhaled, smiling softly. "She always said your forgiveness changed her life, even when you didn't speak it out loud." I smiled. "Forgiveness doesn't need an audience." The old journal later, after they'd all gone outside, I sat in my room and opened an old wooden chest by the window. Inside was my journal, the one I started the night I left the house all those years ago. Its pages were filled with tears, fears, and words that once trembled. I turned to one of the earliest entries. "I feel invisible. My own home has become a stranger's house. My son's love feels borrowed. My heart feels like a guest in its own story." I closed my eyes, remembering that woman, broken, doubting, silenced. Then I turned to the last page I had written in years ago. "Today I planted roses in the garden of second chances. Some will bloom, some won't, but every root will still reach for the light. Maybe that's what healing really means." A letter from the past. As I was about to close the journal, a folded letter slipped out, yellowed, delicate. It was from Rachel. The same one she sent all those years ago. Reading it now didn't sting anymore. Instead, it felt like a bridge between two women who had once stood on opposite sides of pain. I whispered softly. "We both grew, didn't we?" The room felt still, as if the walls themselves were listening. The foundation event a few weeks later, David invited me to a joint event between our foundation and Rachel's, a collaboration to build a new women's center in our town. When I arrived, the hall was alive with people, families, social workers, women who'd found new beginnings. And then I saw her, Rachel. Her hair was streaked with gray now, her face lined by time, but her eyes, they held peace. When our gazes met, the crowd seemed to fade away. She walked toward me slowly, her step steady, her expression open. "Margaret," she said softly. "Rachel." For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, almost naturally, she reached for my hands. "They told me you might come," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't think I'd get the chance to see you again." I smiled. "You've been doing good work." She looked down. "I'm trying to make up for the harm I caused." I squeezed her hands gently. "Don't make up for it, rise above it. You've already done that." Her eyes filled with tears. "You could have destroyed me back then, but you didn't." "Because destroying you wouldn't have fixed me," I said. "It would have only made two broken women instead of one healing one." She nodded slowly, tears streaming freely. "Thank you for not hating me." I smiled. Hate is too heavy to carry into old age. The new beginning that night, I stood on the stage beside Rachel and David. Together, we cut the ribbon for the new center, the Margaret and Rachel Renewal Home. The crowd cheered, but I could barely hear them over the pounding of my heart. Not from excitement, but from peace. I looked at the sign, shining under the lights, and whispered to myself, "This is what freedom really feels like." The final reflection years later, long after the world had quieted again, I sat in my garden, the garden of second chances now wilder and fuller than ever. Birds sang above, and the air smelled of rain and lilac. As I watched the petals fall and new buds rise, I realized something profound. Life doesn't erase pain. It teaches us how to outgrow it. And forgiveness, it's not a gift we give others. It's the key that unlocks our own cage. Epilogue, the letter she never sent in my final years. I wrote one last letter, one that I never sent, but kept in my journal. "Dear Rachel, if you're reading this, I want you to know I never stopped wishing you well. The world was cruel to both of us at times, but somehow, through all the storms, we found the same shore. I hope the women you help see in you what I see now, strength, not shame. Growth, not guilt. You turned pain into purpose, and that's the highest form of redemption. Thank you for teaching me that even the hardest goodbyes can become blessings in disguise." It had been 3 years since the Margaret and Rachel Renewal Home opened. The center had become a refuge for hundreds of women, each with a story stitched together from pain, survival, and rebirth. David now ran the operations full-time, while Rachel worked as a counselor. They were, surprisingly, close, not in love, but in shared purpose. Two people who had once broken each other, now mending others instead. And me. I had stepped back. My body had grown slower, my steps gentler. But my mind, it was alive, full of memories, lessons, and voices that time couldn't erase. One morning, as I sat on the porch, I heard my granddaughter Emma say, "Grandma, why do you write so much in your notebook?" I smiled. "So my words can outlive me." She tilted her head. "Like stories?" "Exactly," I said softly. "Stories remind people who they are, even when they forget." The hidden recording a week later, David came to visit with something in his hand, an old voice recorder. "Mom," he said, smiling, "we were cleaning the foundation storage and found this in one of your old boxes." He pressed play. A younger version of my voice filled the air. "If you're hearing this, it means you found what I left behind. I don't know who you'll be, but I hope you understand that pain isn't permanent. It only lasts until you decide to heal, until you choose peace over pride." The recording went on, a message I had recorded years ago when I'd first started the foundation. I had almost forgotten about it. David's eyes shimmered. "Mom, this is beautiful. We could use this for our next event. It's your voice, your legacy." I hesitated. "It was never meant for the world." He took my hand gently. "Then maybe it's time it was." The event a month later, the foundation hosted a grand gathering, a celebration of a decade of healing. The hall was filled with laughter, warmth, and faces that had once known pain. Rachel stood at the podium first, speaking about transformation and grace. Her words were honest, humble. Then the lights dimmed. David walked on stage. "Before my mother passed this torch to me, she left something behind, a message. Not for one person, but for everyone." The room fell silent. Then my voice filled the space once again. "There will be people who break you because they don't understand your strength. Forgive them anyway. There will be moments when love feels like loss, hold on anyway. And when the world tries to silence you, speak softly, but never stop speaking." By the time it ended, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. Rachel pressed her hand to her chest, whispering, "She's still guiding us." David nodded, his voice breaking. "She always will." The ripple effect the next day, the video of the speech and my recording went viral online. People from all over the world shared it, calling it the voice of the forgotten mother. Letters began arriving from strangers. Women leaving toxic relationships, sons reconciling with mothers, families finding peace. And every time David read them, he smiled and said, "Mom, look what you started." I didn't start it, I thought. Pain did. I just refused to let it end there. Rachel's confession weeks later, Rachel came by the house. We sat in the garden, my garden, with tea and quiet between us. She looked up, her eyes full of reflection. "You know, I used to hate you." I chuckled softly. "I know. But the strange thing is," she continued, "now I see so much of you in myself, the patience, the way I speak to the women at the center, even the way I tend the plants there." "That's not hate, Rachel," I said. "That's inheritance." She smiled through tears. "You really believe people can change, don't you?" "I've seen it," I replied. "In you." The final wish as the sun set that evening, Rachel stood to leave. But before she did, she turned back and asked, "Margaret, when you're gone, how do you want people to remember you?" I smiled. "Not as someone who suffered, but as someone who taught others how to heal." She nodded slowly, eyes glistening. "You already have." And as she walked away, I whispered to the wind, "Then my work is done." Sunrise Part 8, the last bloom, 1,000 words. It happened on a quiet Sunday morning, one so peaceful that the world itself seemed to be holding its breath. The air smelled of rain. The birds sang softly outside. David came to check on me, carrying breakfast and a worried look. "You didn't answer the phone, Mom. I thought you were still sleeping." He found me sitting in my favorite chair by the window, a book open in my lap. My glasses rested beside it, but my eyes were closed, my face calm. I had drifted away, the same way I'd lived, quietly, gently, without drama. The farewell, the news spread fast. The foundation arranged a memorial, not of mourning, but of gratitude. People filled the hall, holding candles, flowers, and stories of how my life had touched theirs. Rachel stood beside David at the podium. Her voice trembled but didn't break. "She once told me that forgiveness is the only inheritance worth passing down," Rachel said. "And now every life she touched carries that inheritance forward." David stepped forward next. His voice was steady, full of pride. "My mother wasn't just the founder of a foundation. She was the foundation of me, of this place, of every life here. And though she's gone, her words will never be." Then he pressed a button, and my voice filled the hall once more, the same recording. "Don't hold on to anger. It's a fire that burns its own home. Build love instead, even if you have to start from ashes." The hall echoed with tears and applause. The secret garden after the ceremony, David brought everyone to the house, to the garden of second chances. There he had planted a new bed of white roses in the center of the garden. A small wooden plaque read, "In loving memory of Margaret Hale, who taught us that love never leaves, it just grows roots." Rachel placed her hand on the plaque, whispering through tears, "Goodbye, Margaret. You gave me a second chance at being human." The grandchildren, Emma and Noah, helped water the roses. "Dad," Emma asked, "will Grandma still see the garden?" David smiled softly. "She's part of it now." The letter to the future months later, while sorting through my belongings, David found one last sealed envelope. It was addressed to him in my handwriting. "My dear David, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But don't cry for me, I've had a full life, one filled with lessons and love. Remember what I told you when you were little. At the heart is a house with many rooms. You and Rachel, you've filled those rooms with light again. Keep it that way. Teach your children that mistakes aren't endings, they're doorways. And when you visit my garden, don't think of me as buried under it. Think of me as the bloom that never stopped reaching for the sun." With love, Mom. David folded the letter carefully, tears wetting the paper. "You did it, Mom," he whispered. "You finally set us all free." Years later, the garden lives on 10 years past. The garden still bloomed every spring, brighter, fuller, wilder. The foundation expanded to new cities, and the annual Margaret Hale Memorial Gala became a symbol of rebirth. Emma, now grown, took over as director. She spoke at her first event with the same grace her grandmother once had. "Some people leave behind houses, others leave behind names," she said. "But my grandmother left behind something better, a path." She paused, looking up. "And we're all still walking it." Final scene as the camera panned across the blooming garden, a soft wind carried the petals into the air. And over that image, the voice that started it all played one last time. "Finally, she's gone. We're free now. But freedom, my dear, isn't about losing someone. It's about learning to love what they left behind." Fade to white. 30 years had passed since my voice first echoed through the halls of the foundation. The world had changed, technology, cities, people. But in one small town, the Margaret and Rachel Renewal home still stood quietly at the edge of a garden that never stopped blooming. And now, a new name graced the brass plaque by its entrance. Emma Hale, Director. The anniversary event, the air was filled with light and laughter as people gathered under golden streamers. This year marked 3 decades since the foundation's opening. Emma stood backstage, adjusting her notes. She looked so much like her father, calm eyes, gentle smile, but she carried her grandmother's quiet fire. Before stepping out, she whispered, "I hope you're watching, Grandma." Then she walked to the podium. The crowd hushed. 30 years ago, Emma began, a woman named Margaret Hale believed that love could heal even the deepest scars. She didn't build this place for fame or recognition. She built it so that pain would never be the final chapter of anyone's story. A ripple of emotion moved through the audience. Rachel, now in her 70s, sat in the front row, wiping tears from her eyes. David, older but strong, rested a proud hand on her shoulder. Emma continued, her voice steady. "My grandmother's words were once a whisper. Today they're a movement. And we are the living proof that kindness can outlive cruelty and forgiveness can outlast anger." Applause filled the hall, echoing like thunder. But Emma wasn't finished. She took a deep breath and smiled. "There's something I've never shared before, something my father found years ago, but we kept private. Tonight feels like the right time." She reached into a small box and lifted a folded piece of yellowed paper. "This," she said softly, "is the last note Margaret ever wrote before she passed. It was never read aloud until now." The room fell silent. Even the air seemed to pause. Emma unfolded the note and began reading. "To whoever carries my story next, remember this. I didn't survive because I was strong. I survived because I refused to stop loving, even when it hurt, even when it broke me. If the world forgets my name, that's all right. Just don't forget the lesson that love in its quietest form is still the loudest truth." By the time she finished, the entire hall was on its feet, applauding through tears. Rachel looked up at the ceiling and whispered, "You did it, Margaret, you did it." The garden at dusk after the event, Emma wandered to the garden behind the foundation, the same garden of second chances her grandmother had planted decades ago. The roses glowed under the soft orange sky, petals trembling in the breeze. She knelt by the old wooden plaque. "In loving memory of Margaret Hale, who taught us that love never leaves, it just grows roots." Her fingers brushed against the letters, worn smooth by time. "Grandma," she murmured, I didn't get to know you, but I feel you everywhere. Every story we save, every life we help, it's you." Behind her, Rachel and David appeared, walking slowly. Rachel smiled faintly. She would have loved seeing this place today. "She does," David said softly. "Every time the wind moves through these roses, that's her." Rachel's last days, months after the anniversary, Rachel fell ill. Her body weakened, but her mind remained clear and bright. She asked to be taken to the garden one last time. As Emma wheeled her outside, the scent of the flowers seemed stronger than ever, vibrant, alive, unstoppable. Rachel smiled weakly. "Do you know what Margaret told me once?" she asked. Emma shook her head. "She said forgiveness isn't saying it's okay. It's saying it mattered, but I won't let it define me." Tears welled in Emma's eyes. "Did she forgive you?" Rachel looked toward the roses swaying gently in the breeze. She didn't need to say it. "I saw it in the way she lived after." That was her answer. Her hand trembled as she reached for one of the white roses. "I used to think freedom meant winning," she whispered. "Now I know it means peace." That night, Rachel passed away quietly, like Margaret had. And when David buried her ashes, he placed them near the same garden, beside the roses she once helped grow. Emma's promise the following spring, Emma returned to the garden alone. She carried a small box. Inside was a single golden locket with pictures of both women, Margaret and Rachel. She buried it under a new rose bush and whispered, "Now you're together again." The sky above her turned crimson, the light soft and forgiving. She opened her journal and began to write. "I used to think stories ended when people did, but now I understand stories don't die. They take root in those who remember them." She paused, smiling through her tears. "You taught us that, Grandma." "You both did." Generations, later years rolled on. The Margaret and Rachel Renewal Home became a network of centers across the country. Women of all ages found refuge and rebirth within its walls. And every branch had one thing in common, a small plaque at the entrance that read, "Forgiveness is not weakness, it's freedom." Emma grew older, her hair silver, her voice calm. Whenever she spoke to new residents, she began with the same words Margaret once said into that recorder. "Pain is only a chapter. You get to write the next one." Final scene, the echo lives on decades later, long after Emma's own passing. A young volunteer was cleaning the original foundation building. In an old storage room, she found a dusty voice recorder. Curious, she pressed play. A crackle of static, then Margaret's voice. "If you're hearing this, it means the garden is still alive." "That means we did it." The girl smiled, tears forming. She looked out the window, and there, beyond the glass, the garden shimmered in the evening light. The roses were still blooming. And the voice, that gentle, unwavering voice, carried one final truth through time. "Finally, she's gone, but freedom isn't the end of love. It's what makes love last forever." Fade out. Rose moral of the complete story. Love can survive betrayal. Forgiveness can rebuild what anger destroys. And sometimes, the greatest victory isn't revenge. It's peace that echoes through generations.